Hi, I'm John McWilliams, Director of TransCanada's Northeast U.S. region. TransCanada is committed to the health and safety of all of our employees and the environment. This video is to remind you about the proper usage and safety precautions around power and hand tools.
Please watch carefully the proper use of the power tools outlined in the video. Before starting any job, we would like to remind you to consult any applicable TransCanada operating procedures, also known as TOPS. TOPS are documents that help mitigate risks during operation and maintenance of TransCanada facilities and equipment to protect people, equipment, processes, and/or the environment. You use power tools on the job almost every day, and we want to remind you to always keep in mind the safety requirements for the proper use of these tools. Power tools are so common that many people think they know just about everything about using them properly and safely. Using these tools every day, often we take them for granted, but we need to be aware of the dangers every time we use these devices. TransCanada's field personnel have outstanding safety records, but a little refresher course never hurt anyone. So, let's do a quick review of some basic power tool safety tips. The number one rule that covers just about everything is summed up in 3 words: know the tool. Familiarity with the tool you're using is essential and will keep you out of trouble almost every time. When we say know the tool, we mean knowing it well enough to know when it's the right tool for a specific job. Too many accidents are a result of people trying to use a tool to do something it was never intended for. But beyond just knowing it's the right tool for the job, you must also be sure that you are familiar with how to use it. This means consulting the manufacturer's instructions, or if you're completely new to using the tool, talk to someone else who has used it. Once you've got the right tool, you're off to a great start, but you're not quite ready to turn it on. Again, we remind you to know the tool. Look at it closely. Make sure it's not missing any parts, especially safety guards, that there are no loose or dull blades. There are not defects or cracks in the tool housing. Guards and safety shutoff switches are in good working order. This kind of inspection should be done each and every time you go to use the tool. Next, you want to make sure you're wearing the appropriate protective equipment. This includes eye protection, such as safety glasses or goggles, ear protection, and face shields. Gloves are also essential while working with hand tools. About 90,000 work-related disabling eye injuries occur each year. Remember this statistic when you think that wearing eye protection is a waste of time. As a general rule, don't wear loose clothing or jewelry when you're operating power tools. They can get caught too easily in equipment, causing serious injury. Okay, so you finally know the tool. Now it's time to think about how to safely operate it. Always check how triggers operate. Some machines will automatically shut off when you release your finger from the switch. Others require you to push a button. You're better off finding this button before you start using the tool. Always transport tools in containers specifically designed to hold them. When you're transferring your tool to another person or done using it, store it so that it won't fall and injure anyone. Don't let cords dangle. They are major tripping hazards. If a tool is any of the 3 Ds, damaged, dull, or defective, tag it and remove it from service until it's either repaired or replaced. Here are some examples of defective tools. Handles which are cracked, broken, loose, or missing. Mushroomed heads on punches or chisels. Loose-fitting jaws on adjustable wrenches. Or damaged power cords. When it comes time to utilize your hand tool, there are important things to consider. If the tool has a sharp edge, you should use a motion that directs the tool away from you and others. When changing blades or bits, make sure the tool is unplugged. If you're in a flammable or explosive area, always work with spark-resistant tools. These may sound like common sense procedures, but always keeping them in mind is vital when it comes to workplace safety. Before we move on to specific tools, here are some reminders about the compressed air tool. There are certain things you must avoid. Never use compressed air for cleaning unless the air pressure is reduced to less than 30 psi, or the nozzle is equipped with a safety device that reduces the pressure to less than 30 psi. Also, avoid directing compressed air towards yourself or someone else. You'd be surprised how much damage can be done that way. There have been examples of pressurized air finding its way into a small cut and entering the bloodstream, sometimes reaching the heart and causing death. Use air-operated tools properly to avoid all the dangers mentioned. Inspect air hoses and couplings regularly. When it comes to the attachments for air-operated tools, keep in mind that they must always be connected to prevent dislodgement, and that they should be kept properly dressed to prevent chipping and small particles of steel from flying off. In this section, we're going to discuss specific tools and how to safely operate them. As we talk about each tool, keep in mind the general safety guidelines we've already gone over. Since these tools remain in one place, their position is very important. Place them in locations with minimal pedestrian traffic or work activity. Always be cautious of your fellow workers, and if necessary, shut down the equipment you're working with to avoid causing injury to people around you. Most tools are very powerful and should never be left unattended, especially if it is energized. Before you make any adjustments to your tool, take the time to de-energize it. To avoid injuries to your hands, block or clamp the work surface before you start drilling. Ensure you remove the chuck key before you begin. Never hold work in your hands when you're using a drill. Also, you should never use your hands to remove chips or cuttings. Instead, opt for a hook, brush, or special tool. Okay, let's talk about grinders. Choosing the correct equipment makes all the difference. Grinders are no different. So when you go to use one, make sure you select the wheel that corresponds with the correct grinder. Also ensure that the grinding wheels and grinder are compatible with regards to wheel size, RPM rating, and arbor. Since grinders vary in size and shape, only use the guard that comes with the tool. Another thing to keep in mind is that not only you, but also the people within 82 feet of you should be wearing protective eyewear. You never know where stray debris might land. When it comes to safety and grinders, the wheels are very important to consider. Here are some tips for wheel safety. Once you go to use the grinder, stand to one side when starting it to avoid being struck by wheel fragments should the wheel break off. One way to make sure this doesn't happen is by avoiding overuse of the wheel. Do not operate wheels without guards in place, or at a speed in excess of that marked on the wheel. Ensure that the face of grinding wheels are properly dressed at all times by using an appropriate dressing tool. The next tool we're going to talk about is wire brush wheels. Let's begin by saying wear a face shield and safety glasses whenever using wire brush wheels. The wires have a tendency to break off and they can fly near your face and eyes. We want to avoid this at all costs. Here are a few points to remember about the guards and hoods for wire brushes. Hoods or guards for grinders are installed to cover the exposed arbor ends. Ensure the hood on the wire brush wheel encloses the wheel as completely as possible. Finally, only use the guard provided. Although not a small power tool, high torques are frequently used in power plants to loosen and tighten nuts and bolts. Follow these steps while using this device. First, find the bolt size which determines the torque. Find the closest electrical receptacle, and if this is not possible, find an appropriate extension cord that can handle the amps, keeping in mind that the circuit has to be 20 amps. Check the levels of the hydraulic fluid. Make sure all fittings are clean of dust and debris. Always do a visual inspection, as well as check the gauge to make sure there is no damage. Inspect the power head and the sockets for hairline cracks or damage. Only use high torque sockets. Make sure the surface the power head exerts pressure on is strong enough to withstand the force. Next, check the hose to make sure the fittings are tight and there are no cracks. Connect fittings securely. Wipe the hose and inspect again while heading back to the unit. Check pressure readings and make sure torque is going in the right direction. Step away while operating the equipment, and all hands should be clear of the equipment. Torque requirements and specs are very important, so please consider them carefully. Working with chainsaws involves more protective gear than any of the other tools we've discussed so far. Here's a list of things to make sure you have with you. Protective eyewear, hard hat with face shield, dual ear protection earplugs and muffs where noise levels are 105 dBA or greater, protective footwear and close-fitting clothes with Kevlar nylon pads on legs and hands. For safety purposes, have another person with you while operating the chainsaw. Before you begin operating the chainsaw, inspect it and make sure that all of the screws and fasteners are secured tightly. Check the chain tension to make sure it's correct. Make certain the chain's cutting teeth are in sharp condition. When you transport the chainsaw, use the chain guard to protect the blade. If you need to refuel at any point, shut down the machine and let it cool. Once it's cool, you can refuel. The best practice for using a multimeter is to test a known source before and after testing equipment. This helps ensure the meter is functioning properly. Most think as long as they choose a multimeter with a high enough voltage rating, they're safe. Not exactly. In fact, as distribution systems become more complex, the possibility of transient overvoltages increases. These transients are invisible, largely unavoidable hazards. They occur regularly on low-voltage circuits and can reach peak values of many thousands of volts. Your safety is dependent on the safety margin built into the meter. The voltage rating alone is not an indication of protection from transients. Causes for transient spikes range from motors starting and stopping, capacitors and power conversion equipment such as variable speed drives. Look for the sticker that says the meter meets the newer IEC 10101 standard. This new standard defines categories 1 through 4, often abbreviated as Cat 1 through Cat 4. The higher the Cat number, the higher the resistance to transient voltages. Always check the voltage rating of your leads. They should be rated as high or higher than your meter. When it comes to personal protection, don't let test leads be the weakest link. Test with one hand when possible to avoid shock defibrillation. Bottom line, analyze the worst-case exposure in your job duties, figure out what Cat number your duties put you under, and make sure your multimeter protects you from the potential transient overvoltages. So, that sums up the basics on tool safety. The final thing we want to discuss today is housekeeping rules. It may sound tedious, but it's something that everyone needs to be mindful of. For example, it's always a good idea to keep the work area clean and organized. If you have a rag soaked with a flammable material on your work table, place it in the proper disposable container. This is a good habit in general, but it's especially important if you're going to turn on a piece of electrical equipment. Sparks could fly and ignite the rag. Dust and debris only create additional hazards.
I realize that for most of you, this is common sense. Please remember that TransCanada's #1 goal is to ensure that each and every employee goes home safe at the end of each workday. I ask you to please make safety your #1 priority.